but it seems that there's something foul amiss. I have questions as to why the occupational therapist was at the home on the day of Hulk Hogan's, and if he was interviewed and the police have that body camera footage, why the family has not seen the footage.
It was supposed to be simple. Hulk Hogan, the most recognizable face in professional wrestling history, passed quietly in his Florida home after years of battling declining health. That was the story, the official version, signed, sealed, delivered. A heart that had carried him through decades of body slams and chair shots had finally given out, we were told. His leukemia diagnosis, his irregular rhythm, all of it neatly tied up in a bow labeled natural causes. But almost as quickly as the news broke, cracks began to appear in the story. Now those cracks look less like coincidence and more like deliberate cover, and the questions hanging in the air are heavier than any belt Hogan ever lifted over his head.
And honestly, that makes sense because we in the public had no idea that was going on. But again, what is happening right now? I will tell you, a lot of weird stuff.
Because the official timeline doesn't add up. Witnesses say there was no classic heart attack clutching, no gasp, no collapse. Instead, Hogan simply stopped breathing, the life in him vanishing in an instant. His wife, Sky, placed the frantic 911 call. Emergency crews raced to the scene. Somewhere in that chaos, an occupational therapist on hand made a jaw-dropping claim to the officers. This wasn't fate. This wasn't inevitability. This was the result of a surgeon slicing his phrenic nerve, the thin but vital wire that tells the diaphragm to move. Sever that and you sever breath itself. And here's the part that has set the rumor mill ablaze. Police body cameras were rolling when that claim was made. That footage exists. Yet for reasons no one has fully explained, it's locked down tighter than championship gold in Vince McMahon's vault.
But for me, who cares, what the press says or what people think, as long as you're being the best person you can. But my priorities, have changed so much because these kids are the most important thing in my life now.
We need to sit with that for a second. The body cam footage that could show us the final chaotic minutes, that could reveal whether medical professionals believed Hogan's end was botched surgery or something darker, has been pulled from public view. Brooke Hogan, estranged daughter and constant thorn in her father's later years, swears she's been told by both officers and nurses that she needs to get her hands on it. On Instagram, she claimed, "Those same professionals feel so passionately about what they witnessed, they have continued to contact me and push me to find specific answers to this very day. They are quite literally putting their careers at risk." Imagine that. Trained people, risking everything, urging the daughter of Hulk Hogan to go digging for evidence the authorities don't want you to see. If that doesn't reek of conspiracy, what does?
And my dad was never alone. He was always with someone. And most of those people I did not like, and I did not get good energy from, and I didn't want to be around. And he kind of gave me the sentiment of like, well, I guess you have to live your life and I have to live mine. And that was kind of how it was left. And it was almost like, I love you, you love me. We have different beliefs and different, opinions on things, but like, we're good.
And that's not even the end of Brooke's crusade. She insists the 911 tapes also hold secrets, and she's hinted that someone, maybe even her father himself, was keeping files on people in his orbit. Rumors of so-called blackmail folders have hovered around Hogan for years, whispered in locker rooms and hotel corridors, but now they've come roaring back with a vengeance. Friends of the Hulkster, speaking under the cloak of anonymity, say he was notorious for keeping receipts on rivals and allies alike. Insurance, he called it. Safety. If you crossed him, he wanted leverage. If he really did stash away compromising files, is it possible someone saw an opportunity to silence him before those files saw daylight? Was the sudden end of Hulk Hogan about more than biology? Let's not forget the timing. In May, Hogan underwent neck fusion surgery. The man who once hoisted Andre the Giant above his head was no stranger to the surgeon's knife. But insiders say this operation was different, riskier, and the whispers about complications began almost immediately. Online chatter had him in a coma. Sky rushed to Instagram in July to swat down those rumors, insisting his heart is strong and there was never any lack of oxygen. Days later, he was gone. And then, only when the pressure mounted, Sky herself admitted that yes, his phrenic nerve had been compromised. Compromised. That careful little word is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Was it severed, damaged, deliberately tampered with? No one seems eager to say.
We've been through a lot. I've forgiven a lot. I've been by his side through everything. Even if I haven't gotten the whole truth, even if I have been a little bit misled, I have still had his back.
Which brings us to the messy heart of this drama, Brooke versus Sky. Brooke, positioned as the grieving daughter who wasn't even invited to say goodbye, is painting herself as the only one willing to fight for the truth. She's furious at being kept in the dark about cremation, furious at having no control over her own father's legacy, and Sky, the widow who legally holds all the power, is keeping her lips sealed. She confirmed an autopsy was done but refused to release the results. She confirmed no cremation has yet happened but offered no timeline. She, more than anyone else, could release the evidence that Brooke says will change the narrative, but she hasn't. The silence is deafening, and the longer it drags on, the more it looks like a battle for something far bigger than just respect for the man in the casket. Of course, this family feud isn't new. Hogan's clan has been throwing chairs at each other long before fans were whispering about malpractice. There was Linda's scorched earth memoir accusing Hogan of infidelity and violent rages. There was Brooke's revelation that she'd asked to be removed from his will, sobbing as she told his money manager to take me off everything. There was Nick, the son, who once made headlines for his reckless driving and now finds himself boots on the ground, trying to manage what's left of this circus. Every branch of this family tree drips with conflict. And now that conflict has fused with the shadow of Hogan's strange end. It's combustible, volatile, a spectacle even Vince himself couldn't script.
To get to the funeral, you have to start at the beginning. I'm embarrassed that it's even come to this. I have a life, I have 2 kids, I have a job, I have a business. I have been trying to live quietly and peacefully. And the only reason my face is on TV right now is because I have had to constantly battle false claims.
But the rumor that Hogan's secret files might have been the real prize, that's the grenade no one wants to touch. If those files do exist, who's in them? Old rivals from the ring? Executives in the entertainment industry he clashed with? We know Hogan was tight with politicians, celebrities, and more than a few media barons. We know he had enemies. The whispers suggest he wasn't shy about keeping insurance against them. Could his final surgery, his final gasp, have been more about what he knew than what his body could endure? Could the reason we don't have that body cam footage be that it captures more than a medical mishap, it captures the fallout of a carefully engineered endgame?
Really difficult time for you for many reasons, and I'm really sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. My heart is racing out of my chest right now, and I'm feeling a plethora of emotions. So I'm going to try to get through this as professionally as I can.
And hovering above all of this is Brooke's defiance. She has declared she has receipts. And while she insists she doesn't want to go public, insiders say she won't hesitate if she feels played and toyed. That phrase alone feels like a warning shot to Sky, to the police, maybe even to the shadowy figures Hogan himself supposedly cataloged in his files. We've seen daughters avenge fathers in Hollywood sagas before, but this one feels different. This is messy, this is personal, and it could expose power players far beyond the Hogan family's suburban Florida home. What Brooke decides to release or not release could shift the entire narrative of how one of wrestling's biggest icons left this world.
Relied on my father for nothing financially. I have my own job. My husband has a job. We do not have any money coming in from my father since I was 18 years old. And everybody else relied on him for a paycheck. And now that golden goose is gone. So I don't know if I'm their emotional, guilty punching bag.
And Sky, she's still holding the cards. She can delay the cremation, she can guard the autopsy, she can keep the vault sealed. Brooke's fight for answers runs straight into Sky's fortress of silence, which leaves us staring at an explosive question. Is this just a dysfunctional family tearing itself apart in the spotlight, or is it the unraveling of a conspiracy that stretches further than anyone dares to admit? What keeps circling back in whispers is the question of Hogan's so-called blackmail files. If they existed, what was in them? This was a man who spent 4 decades in the kind of spotlight that doesn't just reveal, it exposes. He feuded not only with wrestlers, but with promoters, executives, entire corporate machines. His lawsuit against Gawker was so brutal, it bankrupted a media empire and sent shockwaves through journalism itself. He clashed with Hollywood, with reality TV producers, with his own family. He even climbed onto a political stage in 2024, ripping his shirt in front of delegates, tying himself to the rhetoric of Washington. We have to wonder, what kind of receipts did a man like that decide to keep locked away? And who, among that sprawling list of rivals, would have had the most to lose if those files ever saw the light?
But a lot of people need to realize that you inherit things from your environment. And where I grew up was South Tampa, Port Tampa, and it was a really rough neighborhood, very low income. And all my friends, we greeted each other saying that word. We teased each other with that word. The word was just thrown around like it was nothing.
Is it fair to say that you inherited?
The idea of Hogan as a walking vault of secrets isn't far-fetched. Wrestlers from his era often carried grudges like championship belts, and Hogan was infamous for playing politics backstage. Several industry veterans have long claimed he kept notes on shady dealings in locker rooms, steroid controversies, and pay-per-view negotiations that never reached the public. If even a fraction of that ended up in his files, then we're talking about evidence that could sink careers and spark lawsuits. Hollywood wasn't off limits either. He ran in circles with movie stars, athletes, and power brokers. Some insiders speculate those files could have touched on casting couches, financial scandals, even politicians who were just a little too close to the world of wrestling in the 90s. If Hogan truly collected dirt, we may be looking at a motive far more chilling than simple malpractice.
That was real in his heart, which is why it seemed so effortless. But he was great at it. He made a lot of people happy, above and beyond what he did in the ring and for wrestling in general. He was great to those children.
The ripples of this possibility are not confined to Hogan's household. They are shaking the very foundations of professional wrestling itself. WWE, the empire that Hogan helped transform from a regional spectacle into a global juggernaut, now finds itself uncomfortably close to the flames. Executives in Stamford have grown quiet, perhaps too quiet, as whispers circulate that Hogan's secret files may have contained details about questionable payoffs, backstage manipulation, and the kind of handshake deals that could tarnish carefully managed reputations. For a company that thrives on scripted drama, this unscripted threat is one they can't control. What makes this speculation even more unnerving is Hogan's long and stormy history with wrestling's power brokers. He wasn't just a performer, he was a kingmaker. When he jumped ship to WCW in the 90s, he nearly toppled WWE itself, exposing the fragile egos and ruthless tactics that governed the industry. Old grudges from that era never truly faded. Some insiders insist those files might contain receipts of betrayals from that war, names of people who sabotaged careers or bent rules to keep their thrones secure. If that's true, Hogan's passing could ignite a reckoning that the industry has spent decades trying to avoid.
You just learned that Hulk Hogan passed away. I mean, when you heard the news, what was your first thought?
Well, it was almost shock because he was one of those guys who was larger than life. You just assumed, and he didn't appear to age. So you never thought that the last time you saw Hulk Hogan would be the final time you saw Hulk Hogan.
Even among retired wrestlers, anxiety is growing. The old guard remembers the scandals that nearly broke the business: steroid trials, locker room hazing, accusations of cover-ups, and many fear Hogan had documented what others worked so hard to bury. If his files surface, the fallout could rewrite the history of the golden age of wrestling, transforming beloved legends into cautionary villains. Hogan always understood that wrestling was about mythology, about larger-than-life personas crafted for the crowd. But behind the curtain, if his files captured the real stories, those myths could shatter in an instant. There's also the question of timing. WWE is in a new era, chasing billion-dollar streaming deals and courting mainstream acceptance like never before. Sponsors, networks, and global partners don't want to be associated with whispers of corruption or scandal. If Hogan's files implicate anyone still connected to the company, the fallout could be catastrophic. Suddenly, what looked like the private battle of one family in Florida takes on the shape of an industry-wide crisis. The idea that a single man's archive could endanger global business deals makes the silence around his passing feel less like grief and more like strategy.
Good information.
Yep, and his legacy is so large, you don't think it will be diminished to just his steroid use, but I think we have to kind of at least ask, or I want to ask you, would that play a role?
Very much so. It is known to increase risk of heart attacks and strokes, known to increase blood pressure, known to cause activation of the sympathetic nervous system, in addition to a whole host of other effects. So certainly didn't help here. Heart disease is the most common thing that's going to happen to us as we get older, but you layer on top of it steroid use.
And let's not forget Hogan's own relationship with authority. He clashed with Vince McMahon more than once, suing, reconciling, then suing again, always circling between loyalty and betrayal. Some speculate the files might contain private knowledge of corporate decisions that were never meant to see daylight, contract tampering, hidden negotiations, maybe even evidence of favoritism that explains why certain stars rose while others faded. To think that one wrestler, even one as towering as Hogan, could hold this much leverage over an empire makes his absence feel even more loaded. What lingers now is the sense that Hogan's legacy is being fought over not just in his family, but in the corridors of the wrestling industry itself. If his secrets were real, then his passing was more than personal tragedy. It was the spark that could light fires under the entire wrestling establishment. That's why executives are avoiding the subject, why former stars dodge questions, and why conspiracy theories keep multiplying. Because if the truth ever leaks, it won't just change how we view Hulk Hogan, it could change how we view the entire world he helped create.
Is whoever is spinning this negative narrative about me, trying to get ahead or discredit me or whatever they're trying to do. What I've been hearing it's so false, it's laughable.
And then we turn back to Brooke, the daughter who went from estranged to outspoken overnight. She has doubled down on the claim that she has her own receipts, her words, not ours, receipts about her father's past, receipts about her own mistreatment, and maybe even receipts that overlap with whatever Hogan himself had stockpiled. She's painted a picture of herself as someone who was mentally battered and manipulated since childhood, only to be locked out entirely in the aftermath of his passing. She wasn't at the funeral, she wasn't consulted about the autopsy, she doesn't even know if cremation has happened, and yet she insists she could blow the lid off everything if she chose to. That's not grief talking, that's someone positioning themselves as a gatekeeper of her own. If Brooke decides to unload, who knows how many names could tumble out. But Skye sits opposite her in this tug of war, holding the ultimate power. She's the widow, the legal voice, the person with control over Hogan's remains and his estate. She's confirmed just enough, yes, his phrenic nerve was compromised, yes, an autopsy was done, but never enough to satisfy anyone. Why stay silent if she has nothing to hide? Is this about dignity? About keeping private what Brooke seems intent on dragging public? Or is silence its own kind of shield, protecting information too explosive to reveal? The contrast is stark. Brooke flooding Instagram with emotional statements, Skye retreating behind controlled comments and refusal to elaborate. Each woman seems to be daring the other to blink first.
If you want to give it a quick Google, anybody can find out the hurt that has happened to me throughout the years. And I've forgiven, and I've always put my dad first. That's my daddy. People know, as a woman, a father-daughter bond is so strong, even more so than a mother-daughter bond, And I love my mom, but my dad and I were very close.
This tug of war drags us deeper into speculation. If Skye has access to Hogan's files, is that why she's been so restrained, so unwilling to release details? Could she be sitting on information that implicates not just wrestling's old guard, but powerful people in business and politics? Or, more cynically, is this feud nothing more than a grieving daughter picking fights out of frustration, while a widow quietly manages the mess? It's impossible to ignore that the public record keeps shifting. One week, Hogan's cause is heart failure. The next week, it's complications from surgery. And through it all, we get Brooke insisting the narrative is wrong. The truth feels like it's buried under layers of spin and self-interest. And every day that passes without answers adds weight to the theory that something is being concealed. When we consider Hogan's legacy, it's ironic. The man who built his career on scripted spectacle might have left behind the most unscripted drama of all. A wrestler who reinvented himself a dozen times, hero, villain, movie star, reality show dad, may now be remembered just as much for the mystery of his end as for body-slamming Andre. And if the whispers about files, blackmail, and cover-ups are real, then his final act could have been the ultimate power play, keeping secrets so potent that even in his absence, people fight to control them. The silence of law enforcement about the body cam footage, the refusal to release autopsy results, the tug of war between Brooke and Skye, it all keeps the conspiracy alive.
Do you have any personal preference who ethnically your daughter dates?
No, I don't. Actually, the guy my daughter was dating, I liked him a lot. I've known him for quite a while. And I was very mad at a personal situation that happened with my daughter.
Are you a racist?
No, I'm not. I'm not a racist. I never should have said what I said. It was wrong. I'm embarrassed by it.
And so, we're left staring into the fog of what-ifs. Were Hogan's files the reason his story ended the way it did? Did he keep evidence of betrayals and crimes that someone wanted erased forever? Is Brooke holding back revelations that could burn down reputations? Or is she a pawn in a much larger game? Was Skye protecting her husband's dignity or protecting others from what might spill out? The truth is hidden, but the speculation is roaring louder than ever. And here's the question we can't escape. If those secrets were powerful enough to silence Hulk Hogan, then who out there is still pulling strings to keep them buried? Drop your theories in the comments because this storm is only getting darker. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and we'll see you in the shadows.